The night sky over Nevada was quiet and peaceful on July 2031. When everything changed forever for humanity, Emily Park was sleeping in her small apartment near the NASA Research Center when her phone started ringing at 3 in the morning. She was only 32 years old, but she was already one of the smartest scientists working for the space agency. Her specialty was physics, and she had spent her whole life dreaming about the stars. When she answered the phone, her boss was screaming something about a crash site, and she needed to come immediately. She had never heard him sound so scared in her life, too. Hours later, she was standing at the edge of the biggest crater she had ever seen. The desert sand had turned to glass from the heat of whatever had landed there. Military helicopters were flying overhead, and soldiers were everywhere. But Emily was not looking at any of them. She was looking at the thing in the middle of the crater. It was a spaceship, not a human spaceship, because humans had never built anything like this. It was almost a mile long, and it was broken and damaged beyond anything she could imagine. Huge holes had been torn through its hull, and strange fluids were leaking out onto the sand. The fluids glowed with a soft blue light that made everything look like a dream. Captain David Kim walked up beside her. He was Air Force, and he had been assigned to protect the crash site. He was a tall man with a serious face, and he looked just as shocked as Emily felt. They just left it here, he said quietly, like it was garbage. Emily could not speak at first. She just stared at the massive alien ship and tried to understand what she was seeing. Her whole life she had wondered if humans were alone in the universe. Now she had her answer, and it was terrifying, but it was also exciting. She walked closer to the ship, ignoring the soldiers who tried to stop her. She needed to touch it. She needed to know it was real. When her hand pressed against this metal hull, she felt warmth spreading through her fingers. The ship was not dead. It was still alive somehow, still holding on to the last bits of its power. This changes everything, she whispered. David stood beside her with his hand on his weapon. He was trained to protect against any threat. But how could anyone protect against something like this? What do we do now? He asked Emily. Turned to look at him, and there was fire in her eyes. We learn from it, she said. We take it apart piece by piece, and we figure out how it works, and then we make it ours. Within 1 week, the crash site had become the most secret location on Earth. The United Nations held emergency meetings, and every country agreed that this was bigger than any war or conflict. They formed something called Project Phoenix, and they brought together the smartest scientists from every nation to work on the alien ship. Emily was made the director of reverse engineering. It was her job to understand the alien technology and find ways to copy it or improve it. David was made the head of security because someone needed to make sure the secret stayed safe. The first year was the hardest. They did not even understand the basic materials the ship was made from. The metal was stronger than anything on Earth, but it was also lighter than aluminum. The computer systems used a language that no human could read. The engines operated on principles that seemed to break the laws of physics, but humans are stubborn creatures. They do not give up easily. Emily worked 20-hour days for months. She barely ate and she rarely slept. Her whole life became the ship, and nothing else mattered. Her boyfriend left her because she never had time for him. Her friends stopped calling because she never answered. She did not care. All she cared about was understanding. Slowly, they began to make progress. A young engineer named Brian Lee figured out how to read the alien computer language. He discovered that the ship had come from something called the Dominion, which was a massive empire that controlled 3 entire galaxies. The ship had been damaged in a battle, and the Dominion had decided it was too broken to repair. So they had simply abandoned it on the nearest primitive planet Earth. When Emily read the translation, she felt a cold anger building inside her chest. The aliens had not crashed here by accident. They had thrown their garbage on her planet, like humans throwing trash out of a car window. They thought so little of humanity that they did not even consider humans worth talking to. They think we are insects, she told David one night. They think we are too stupid to matter. David nodded slowly. His jaw was tight, and his hands were clenched into fists. Then we show them how. Wrong they are. He said. The work continued year after year. The scientists made discovery after discovery. They learned how the engines worked by bending space itself. They learned how the weapons generated energy beams that could cut through any material. They learned how the shields created barriers that could stop almost anything. But they also learned that the aliens had made mistakes. Dominion was powerful, but they had grown lazy over thousands of years. Their technology was old, and they had stopped trying to improve it. They used the same designs their ancestors had created, because they thought those designs were perfect. Emily saw the flaws immediately. The engines were only running at 60% efficiency, because no one had bothered to optimize them. The weapons fired slowly because the power systems were poorly designed. The shields only used one frequency, which meant they could be broken. If you knew the right trick, we can do better than this, Emily announced it. A meeting in year 3. We are not going to just copy their technology. We are going to improve it. We are going to take their broken garbage and turn it into something they have never seen before. The other scientists looked at her like she was crazy. But then Brian Lee stood up and smiled. I already have some ideas, he said. That was the moment everything changed. Instead of just trying to repair the alien ship, the humans began to redesign it. They combined alien technology with human creativity. They found solutions the Dominion had never imagined. They pushed the limits further than anyone thought possible. By year 5, they had rebuilt the engines to run at 90% efficiency. By year 7, they had tripled the firing rate of the weapons. By year 10, they had created a completely new shield system that was almost impossible to break. And they did not stop there. Emily had an idea that the aliens would never expect. She knew that the Dominion thought they were the most advanced civilization in the universe, but humans had developed something the aliens had never considered: nuclear weapons. The scientists figured out how to combine nuclear bombs with alien propulsion systems. They created missiles that could travel faster than light and hit targets before anyone could react. They created weapons of pure destruction that made the alien technology look weak. By year 15, the broken ship was gone. In its place stood something new, something powerful, something terrifying. They called it the Vengeance. Emily stood on the bridge of the completed ship and looked at everything they had built. She was 47 years old now. Her hair had started turning gray, and her body was tired from years of endless work. But her eyes were still bright with the same fire she had felt on that first night in the desert. David stood beside her just like he always had. He had grown older too, but he was still the same steady presence she had come to depend on. We did it, she said quietly. No, David replied. We just got started. He was right. The ship was finished, but the real test was still coming, because somewhere out there in the darkness between the stars, the Dominion had noticed something strange happening on that little primitive planet they had used as a garbage dump, and they were coming to investigate. The year was 2046, and the world had changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. 15 years ago, deep beneath the Nevada desert, a massive underground facility had been built to hide the greatest secret in human history. Thousands of workers lived and worked there, spending years away from their families and friends. All of them had sworn to keep the secret, and all of them believed in what they were doing. Brian Lee walked through the corridors of the facility with a tablet in his hands. He was 45 years old now, and his hair was completely gray from stress and long hours. But he smiled as he looked at the numbers on his screen, because those numbers told a story of impossible success. He had joined Project Phoenix as a young engineer fresh out of college. He had been so nervous on his first day that he could barely speak. Now he was the senior engineer in charge of all technical systems. He had spent 15 years of his life on this project, and he did not regret a single moment. The elevator took him down to the main hangar, and when the doors opened, he stopped to admire the view. He did this every single day because he never got tired of seeing it. The Vengeance filled the entire hangar. It was no longer the broken wreck that had crashed in the desert 15 years ago. Every piece of the original hull had been replaced with new materials that human scientists had created by improving alien designs. The ship was sleek and beautiful with lines that seemed to flow like water. It was painted in dark gray and black, so it would be hard to see against the emptiness of space, but the real improvements were on the inside. Ryan walked up the main boarding ramp and entered the ship. He knew every corridor and every room because he had helped design them all. The alien ship had been confusing and poorly organized with important systems scattered randomly throughout the hull. The human version was logical and efficient with everything placed exactly where it needed to be. He reached the engine room and found his team already working. They were running final tests on the propulsion systems, and everything was going perfectly. The original Dominion engines had used something called fold space technology, which allowed the ship to travel faster than light by bending space around itself. It was amazing technology, but the aliens had never bothered to make it work properly. They just accepted the limitations because they had always been there. Brian and his team had not accepted anything. They had spent years studying the engines and finding ways to improve them. They had discovered that the power flow was inefficient, and they had redesigned the entire system. They had found that the navigation computers were slow, and they had replaced them with faster human designs. They had realized that the cooling systems were inadequate, and they had built something better. The result was an engine that was 50% more powerful than the original Chief. "The sensors are showing a small fluctuation in Reactor 3, said one of his engineers. A young woman named Jenny Beek-Brin walked over to her station and looked at the readings. She was right, there was a tiny variation in the power output, but he had seen this before, and he knew exactly what to do. Adjust the magnetic containment by 0.03%, he said. That should smooth it out. Jenny made the adjustment, and the fluctuation disappeared. She smiled up at him with admiration. In her eyes, all the young engineers looked at him that way because he had taught most of them everything they knew. Meanwhile, in another part of the ship, the weapon systems were being tested. Lieutenant Kevin Song stood in the targeting room and watched as holographic displays showed simulated combat scenarios. He was 30 years old, and he had been training for this job since he was 20. The military had recruited the best soldiers from every country and trained them specifically to fight aliens. Kevin had never failed a simulation. The main weapon systems were energy-based, using the same technology the Dominion had developed. But the human engineers had made significant improvements. The original weapons could fire one shot every 30 seconds because the power systems needed time to recharge. Kevin and his team had found ways to reduce that time to 4 seconds. That meant human ships could fire 7 times faster than alien ships, but the energy weapons were not the only thing the Vengeance carried. Deep in the lower decks, hidden behind thick walls of radiation shielding, there were missiles. Nuclear missiles modified with alien technology. These weapons were Emily Park's idea, and they were perhaps the most terrifying thing humans had ever created. Each missile carried a warhead with enough power to destroy a small moon. And thanks to the alien propulsion systems, they could travel faster than light and hit their targets before anyone could react. The Dominion had never developed nuclear weapons because they thought energy beams were more elegant. They were about to learn that elegance did not win wars. General Susan Cho arrived at the facility that afternoon for a final inspection. She was 60 years old with short gray hair and a face that never smiled. She had fought in 3 wars during her career, and she had seen things that would break most people, but nothing had prepared her for this. She walked through the ship with Emily Park and Brian Lee, listening as they explained every system. Emily pointed out the triple-layered shields that rotated through 12,000 frequencies per second. Brian demonstrated the navigation systems that could plot a course across the galaxy in seconds. When They reached the bridge. General Cho finally allowed herself a small smile. "You actually did it," she said. "You took their garbage and made something better." Emily nodded. "We did not just make something better, General. We made something they cannot stop." The bridge was the heart of the ship, with stations for every critical function. There was a command chair in the center, where the Admiral would sit, and large view screens that could display anything from star maps to enemy positions. Everything was designed for efficiency and speed, because in a battle seconds could mean the difference between life and death. "There is one more thing," Brian said. "We added something special." He pressed a button and a holographic display appeared in the center of the bridge. It showed a diagram of the ship with all its systems highlighted in different colors. "This is the integration network," he explained. "Every system on this ship is connected to every other system. If the shields take damage, the weapons automatically adjust to compensate. If the engines need more power, the other systems reduce their consumption automatically." General Cho raised an eyebrow. "That is impressive. The Dominion ships do not have anything like this." Brian continued. "They were designed thousands of years ago, when computers were less advanced. Their systems do not talk to each other the way ours do. That is one of their biggest weaknesses, and we will exploit it," Emily added. Evening, a meeting was held in the main conference room of the facility. All the department heads were there, along with representatives from the United Nations. They had all seen the reports, and they knew what was coming. 6 months ago, our sensors detected a Dominion fleet heading toward Earth, Emily announced. "The aliens have noticed our energy signatures. They are coming to investigate." Room was silent as everyone processed this information. "How many ships?" asked General Cho. "We estimate 40 to 50 warships." Emily replied, "Each one is larger than the Vengeance." Someone at the back of the room made a sound of despair, but Emily held up her hand. "Do not panic," she said. "We knew this would happen eventually. That is why we have been preparing. We have one ship, but it is worth 100 of theirs. Our technology is better. Our crews are trained. Our weapons are stronger." She looked around the room at all the faces watching her. "We have been waiting 15 years for this moment. The Dominion threw their garbage on our planet because they thought we were nothing. They did not even consider that we might fight back." Her voice grew harder and colder. "They were wrong. The preparations began immediately. Crews were assigned, and training intensified. The ship was loaded with supplies and weapons. Every system was tested 100 times to make sure nothing would fail. And in the darkness of space, the Dominion fleet grew closer. They had no idea what was waiting for them." Commander James Yoon stood in the fighter hangar of the Vengeance and tried to control his breathing. His heart was pounding so hard that he could feel it in his throat, and his hands were shaking slightly at his sides. He had been flying jets for 18 years. He had served in combat zones and faced death more times than he could count. He had always been calm under pressure, always in control. But this was different. This was the moment everything changed. The fighters lined up in front of him were unlike anything humans had ever built. They were sleek and angular, with wings that could fold in different configurations depending on the situation. Their hulls were made from the same improved materials as the Vengeance itself, and their engines could accelerate faster than any human pilot had ever experienced. James walked up to the nearest fighter and ran his hand along its surface. The metal was smooth and warm, just like the ship that Emily Park had touched in the desert 15 years ago. He had read the reports about that night. He knew how it all began. Now he was going to be part of how it continued. Lieutenant Commander Grace Hong walked up beside him and crossed her arms. She was his second in command, and she was perhaps the most talented pilot he had ever met. She was 32 years old, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had a reputation for being cold and distant, but James knew that was just how she protected herself. "These are beautiful machines," she said. James nodded. "They are, but a machine is only as good as its pilot." Grace smiled slightly. "That is why they chose us. They have been selected from thousands of candidates pilots. from every nation had been tested and evaluated, and only the very best had made it through. James had been chosen to lead Alpha Squadron, which consisted of 12 pilots who would fly escort for the Vengeance. Each of them knew they might not survive the coming battle. The briefing room was crowded when James and Grace arrived. All 12 members of Alpha Squadron were there, along with the squadron leaders from Beta and Gamma teams. There were 36 fighter pilots in total, and every single one of them looked nervous. Admiral Victor Kang entered the room, and everyone immediately stood at attention. He was 73 years old, but he moved like a man half his age. His hair was completely white, and his face was lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp and commanding. He had fought in more battles than anyone else in the room, and he had never lost. At ease, the Admiral said. Everyone sat down, and the lights dimmed. A holographic display appeared showing a map of the solar system with a cluster of red dots moving toward Earth. The Dominion fleet. Admiral Kang began. They will arrive in 3 weeks. 47 warships, each one crewed by thousands of aliens who think we are nothing more than primitive animals. He paused and looked around the room. They are wrong. The display changed to show the Vengeance with all its systems highlighted. This ship is the most powerful weapon ever created by any species anywhere in this galaxy. Our scientists took the broken garbage the Dominion left behind and turned it into something magnificent. Our engines are faster, our weapons are stronger, our shields are tougher. He stepped closer to the hologram and pointed at the fighter bays. But a battleship cannot fight alone. That is where you come in. James leaned forward in his seat, paying close attention. Alpha Squadron will fly escort from the Vengeance. Your job is to protect this ship from enemy fighters and bombers. Beta Squadron will engage enemy capital ships and target their engines. Gamma Squadron will provide support wherever it is needed. The Admiral looked directly at James. Commander Yoon, I am trusting you with the most important job. You must keep this ship safe, no matter what. James stood and saluted. Yes, sir. Briefing continued for another hour. They discussed tactics and formations and emergency procedures. They studied the enemy ships and learned their weaknesses. They practiced communication protocols and established backup plans. When the meeting finally ended, James stayed behind. He needed a moment alone to process everything. Admiral Kang noticed and walked over to him. You look troubled. Commander James shook his head. It is not trouble, sir. It is just a lot to take in. Yesterday, I was a normal pilot. Today, I am part of the most important mission in human history. The Admiral smiled. It is strange, is it not, how quickly things can change. Sat down in one of the empty chairs and gestured for James to do the same. I was 58 years old when that ship crashed in the desert. The Admiral said. I had already retired from active duty. I thought my fighting days were over. What happened? James asked. They asked me to come back. Kang replied. The President herself called me and said they needed someone to lead the military side of Project Phoenix, someone who understood both war and patience. He looked at the holographic display still floating in the middle of the room. I have spent 15 years preparing for this moment. I have trained thousands of soldiers and planned hundreds of scenarios. I have thought about this battle every single day for 15 years. His voice grew quieter, and I am still scared. James was surprised. That Admiral had always seemed so confident, so sure of everything. To hear him admit fear was almost shocking. Fear is not weakness, the Admiral continued. Fear is wisdom. Only a fool faces death without being afraid. The important thing is what you do with that fear. What do you do with it, Siri? Use it, Admiral Kang replied. I let it sharpen my mind and quicken my reflexes. I let it remind me that every decision matters. I let it push me to be better than I was yesterday. He stood up and put his hand on James' shoulder. You will be afraid when the battle comes. That is normal, but I have seen your records, Commander. You are one of the best pilots we have ever produced. When the moment arrives, you will know what to do. James felt something shift inside him. The fear was still there, but it was smaller now, more manageable. "Thank you, sir," he said. The admiral nodded and walked toward the door, but he stopped before leaving and turned back one more thing. Commanders of those aliens thought they could throw their garbage on our planet, and we would just accept it. They thought we were too stupid and weak to matter. His eyes burned with cold fury. Make them regret that assumption. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of training and preparation. James and his squadron flew simulation after simulation until they could perform every maneuver in their sleep. They studied the enemy fighters and learned exactly where to aim. They practiced working together until they moved as one unit. Grace proved to be an incredible second in command. She pushed the other pilots harder than anyone else, but she also supported them when they needed it. She had a gift for seeing weaknesses and finding ways to fix them. The night before the battle, James could not sleep. He lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. He thought about his parents who had died when he was young. He thought about his grandfather, who had been a soldier and had taught him about honor and duty. He thought about all the people on Earth who did not know what was coming and would never know about the sacrifice being made for them. He thought about what it meant to be human. "We are small," James whispered to himself. "We live on one tiny planet, in one tiny corner of one tiny galaxy. We should be nothing, but we are not nothing." He closed his eyes and finally slept. When he woke up, the alarms were already sounding. The Dominion fleet had arrived early. They were here. James jumped out of bed and ran to the hangar. His squadron was already suiting up and climbing into their fighters. Everyone moved with purpose and precision, just like they had trained. Grace met him at his fighter and helped him with his helmet. "This is it," she said. James looked at her and saw no fear in her eyes, only determination. "Let us show them what humans can do," he said. He climbed into his fighter and felt the familiar hum of the engines coming to life. The cockpit displays lit up, showing him everything he needed to know. Enemy positions, friendly positions, weapon status, shield status. The hangar doors opened and he saw the stars, and beyond the stars he saw the enemy. 47 massive warships hanging in space like angry gods. They were here to destroy humanity, to punish humans for daring to touch their garbage. James smiled. They had no idea what was coming. The bridge of the Vengeance was silent as the enemy fleet appeared on the view screen. Admiral Victor Kang sat in his command chair and studied the alien ships with cold, calculating eyes. He'd been waiting for this moment for 15 years. He had imagined it thousands of times in his dreams and nightmares. Now it was real. 47 warships hung in the darkness of space. Each one was massive, with hulls that stretched for miles and weapons that could destroy cities with a single shot. They were arranged in a formation that spoke of absolute confidence. The Dominion had conquered thousands of worlds, and they expected this to be just another easy victory. They were about to learn otherwise. "Admiral, they are hailing us," said communications officer Rachel Shen. She was young, only 25 years old, but she had proven herself to be brilliant at her job. Her fingers moved across her console with practiced ease. "Put them through," Kang replied. The view screen flickered and changed. The image of the enemy fleet was replaced by something that made several people on the bridge gasp in horror. The alien was vaguely humanoid, but wrong in ways that were hard to describe. It had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on a face covered in skin that looked like cracked leather. Its mouth was wide and filled with teeth. It seemed too sharp and too many. Its body was wrapped in robes of dark purple, and it radiated an aura of absolute contempt. "Primitive creatures," the alien said. Its voice was translated by the ship's computer into flat, emotionless English. "You have defiled Dominion property. This is a crime punishable by extinction." Admiral Kang said nothing. He simply watched and waited. The alien seemed annoyed by the silence. It leaned forward and its 4 eyes narrowed. "You will surrender immediately. Your world will be harvested for resources. Your species will be eliminated. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." Still Kang did not respond. The alien's cracked skin flushed with what might have been anger. "Do you understand what I am saying, primitive? Are you too stupid to comprehend your own doom finally?" Admiral Kang spoke. His voice was calm and steady, without a trace of fear. "I understand perfectly." The alien seemed surprised that he could speak at all. "Then you will surrender?" No, the single word hung in the air like a thunderclap. The alien's eyes widened and its mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile or a sneer. "You dare refuse the Dominion? Has conquered 1,000 galaxies. We have destroyed species far more advanced than yours. You are nothing but insects crawling in the dirt, Admiral." Kang stood up slowly. His old bones protested, but he ignored them. He walked toward the view screen until he was close enough to see his own reflection in the alien's eyes. 15 years ago, he said, you threw your broken garbage on our planet. You did not ask permission. You did not warn us. You simply dumped your trash and flew away because you thought we were too primitive to matter. The alien laughed, a horrible gurgling sound. That ship was worthless, destroyed beyond repair. Even our lowest technicians could not have fixed it. What could primitives possibly do with it? Kang smiled. "We fixed." If the alien stopped laughing, "We did not just fix it," Kang continued, "we improved it. We made it faster and stronger and deadlier than anything your empire has ever created." "That is impossible," the alien sputtered. "Is it?" Kang gestured to the bridge around him. "Look at where I am standing. Look at the ship that surrounds me. This is your garbage, rebuilt by human hands, improved by human minds." Stepped even closer to the screen. "And now I'm going to use your own technology to destroy you, alieness." Face twisted with rage. "You will die screaming for this." Admiral Kang turned away from the screen and walked back to his command chair. He sat down and looked at his crew. Every face was tense, but determined. They had trained for this. They were ready. "Rachel," he said, "cut the transmission." "Yes, sir." Alien's face disappeared, replaced once again by the image of the enemy fleet. "Weapons officer," Kang said. "Report." Lieutenant Kevin Song looked up from his console. "All weapons are charged and ready, sir. Targeting solutions are locked for the lead vessel. Shields fully operational, operating at maximum efficiency." Kang nodded. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "All hands, this is the Admiral battle stations throughout the ship." Alarms began to sound. Crews rushed to their positions and systems came online. The Vengeance was waking up, and it was angry in the fighter hangar. Commander James Yoon led Alpha Squadron out into space. Their fighters moved in perfect formation, weaving between the stars like dancers' grace. Hong was on his wing, exactly where she was supposed to be. "Alpha Squadron to Vengeance," James reported. "We are in position and ready." Acknowledged. Alpha Admiral Kang replied, "Give them hell on the bridge." Kang watched as the enemy fleet began to move. The Dominion ships were powering up their weapons, confident that this would be a short fight. Fire. Kang ordered. The first volley from the Vengeance was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Energy beams lanced out from the human ship, each one precisely targeted at critical systems on the lead Dominion cruiser. The alien shields flickered and failed in seconds because they only operated on a single frequency. The human weapons had been designed to exploit that exact weakness. The Dominion cruiser exploded in a ball of fire. For a moment, the enemy fleet seemed frozen in shock. They had expected an easy victory. They had not even bothered to raise their shields to full power. They had assumed that a ship built by primitives could not possibly hurt them. 12 more ships died before they could react. "Continue firing," Kang commanded. The Vengeance unleashed everything it had. Energy beams tore through enemy hulls, and nuclear missiles streaked across the void, faster than the aliens could track them. The human ship danced through space, its engine so powerful that it could outmaneuver vessels half its size. Enemy fighters began launching from the Dominion ships. There were hundreds of them swarming like angry insects toward the Vengeance. Alpha Squadron engaged, James shouted. His fighter screamed forward with Grace right beside him. They plunged into the swarm of enemy fighters and began to kill. The alien pilots were skilled, but they were also arrogant. They had never faced an enemy that could match them, and they did not know how to adapt. James destroyed 5 fighters in the first 30 seconds. Grace destroyed 7. Their squadron moved as one unit, covering each other and striking with precision. "This is too easy," Grace said over the radio. James watched as another enemy fighter exploded in front of him. "Do not get overconfident," he replied. "They are still learning." He was right. The Dominion was beginning to adapt. Their remaining ships were raising shields and forming defensive formations. They had realized that this was not going to be the easy victory they expected, but it was already too late. Vengeance had destroyed 23 enemy ships in the first 10 minutes of battle. The remaining 24 were damaged and disorganized. Their flagship was burning, and their commander was screaming orders that no one could follow. Admiral Kang watched the chaos on his view screen and felt something he had not expected: pity. These aliens had conquered galaxies. They had destroyed countless species and enslaved billions of beings. They had thought themselves invincible, but in the end they were just as fragile as everyone else, and they had made the mistake of underestimating humanity. "Admiral, the enemy flagship is trying to retreat," Rachel reported. Kang considered for a moment. He could let them go. He could show mercy, but then he remembered the contempt in the alien's voice. He remembered being called primitive and stupid. He remembered 15 years of work and sacrifice and fear. "No," he said. "No retreats. No survivors." Vengeance turned its weapons on the fleeing flagship. Battle continued for 6 more hours until the last Dominion ship was destroyed. The silence after the battle was almost unbearable. Commander James Yoon flew his fighter through the debris field that had once been the Dominion fleet. Pieces of alien ships floated everywhere, some still glowing from the fires that had consumed them. Bodies drifted in the vacuum, their alien faces frozen in expressions of shock and disbelief. They had expected an easy victory. They had found death instead. James felt empty. He had killed more enemies than he could count, and he knew he should feel something, pride or satisfaction or even guilt, but all he felt was tired. "Alpha Leader, this is vengeance." Admiral Khan's voice came through his radio. "Return to the ship. We are done here. Copy that." "Vengeance," James replied. "Alpha Squadron, form up. We are going home." One by one, his pilots fell into formation behind him. They had lost 2 fighters during the battle. Young pilots who had trained for years and died in seconds. James would remember their names forever. Grace Hong pulled up beside him and matched his speed. Her fighter was damaged with scorch marks across the hull, and one wing bent at an awkward angle. But she was alive. "We did it," she said. Her voice was flat without any celebration. James nodded. "Yes, we did." They flew back to the Vengeance in silence. The hangar was chaos when they landed. Medical teams were rushing everywhere, treating wounded crew members. Engineers were already working on damaged systems. Everywhere James looked, he saw exhausted faces and haunted eyes. Victory was not supposed to feel like this. He climbed out of his fighter and removed his helmet. The air smelled like smoke and blood and fear. But there was something else too. Something that felt almost like hope. Commander Yoon. James turned and saw Admiral Kang walking toward him. The old man looked even older now, with new lines on his face and a heaviness in his shoulders. But his eyes were still sharp, and there was something in them that James had not seen before. Sir James saluted. The Admiral returned the salute. "You did well today. Your squadron performed beyond all expectations." "Thank you, sir. But we lost people." "I know." Kang's voice softened. "We will mourn them properly, I promise. But right now I need you on the bridge, sir." Admiral turned and walked away. James followed without another word. The bridge was crowded when they arrived. Every senior officer had gathered along with Emily Park and Brian Lee, who had come up from the engineering sections. Everyone was staring at the main view screen, which showed the debris field stretching across the void. 47 ships, Admiral Kang said quietly. "The largest fleet the Dominion has sent to any single planet in 100 years, and we destroyed them all," Emily replied. There was no triumph in her voice, Only wonder we actually did it. Brian was running calculations on his tablet. According to my estimates, the Dominion will receive news of this defeat in approximately 3 months, depending on how fast their communication systems work. And then, what? General Susan Cho asked. She had arrived on a shuttle from Earth just minutes after the battle ended. Then they will send more ships. Kang replied many more. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. This battle was just the beginning. The war was far from over. But first Admiral Kang said, "We need to send a message." He turned to Rachel Shin, who was still at her communication station. "Open a channel, all frequencies. Every language we can translate. I want everyone in this galaxy to hear what I am about to say." Rachel's fingers flew across her console channels. "Open, sir. Broadcasting on all frequencies." Admiral Kang stood in front of the view screen and straightened his uniform. He looked at the debris field one more time, and then he looked directly into the camera. "This is Admiral Victor Kang of the Earth Starship. Vengeance speaking on behalf of humanity." His voice was calm and steady, carrying the weight of 15 years of preparation. 15 years ago, the Dominion abandoned a broken ship on our world. They thought we were primitive. They thought we were weak. They thought we would bow before their superior technology. He paused, letting the words sink in. They were wrong. We took their garbage and we made it into something beautiful. We took their scraps and we forged a weapon, and when they came to punish us for our audacity, we destroyed them. His voice grew harder, colder. "Let this be a warning to every empire, every conqueror, every species that looks at Earth and sees. Pray. We are not victims. We are not slaves. We are humanity. And we do not forgive. We do not forget." He stepped closer to the camera until his face filled the screen. "You abandoned us in the dark. We learned to make our own light. Come for us again and we will burn you all." The transmission ended, and the bridge was silent. Emily Park had tears in her eyes. She had spent 15 years working toward this moment, sacrificing everything for a goal that sometimes seemed impossible. Now it was done. Brian Lee was smiling despite everything. He had helped build the most powerful ship in the galaxy, and he had watched it prove its worth. General Cho was already planning. Their victory today would mean nothing if they could not defend against the next attack. They needed more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. James Yoon stood by the viewport and looked out at the stars. He thought about the pilots who had died today and the pilots who would die in the battles to come. He thought about his grandfather, who had taught him about duty and sacrifice. This was just the beginning. Admiral Kang dismissed the officers and stood alone on the bridge for a long moment. He was 73 years old, and he was tired, but he could not rest. Not yet. The Dominion would come again. They would send more ships and more soldiers. They would want revenge for this humiliation, and humanity would have to be ready. He pressed a button on his command chair. "All departments. This is the Admiral. Begin repairs immediately. I want this ship combat ready within 30 days. Voices acknowledged his order from all over the ship. Engineers and technicians and soldiers, all moving with purpose. They had won one battle, but they knew the war was just starting. Emily Park joined him by the viewport. She looked older than he remembered, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes. But there was still fire in her gaze. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Kang replied, "We build more ships. We train more soldiers. We prepare." He looked at the debris field one last time, "Because they will be back, and when they come, we will be ready." Emily nodded. She had dedicated her entire adult life to this cause, and she was not about to stop. "Now we started with nothing," she said. "One broken ship and a lot of determination, and look what we built." Kang agreed. They stood in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness between galaxies, the message was spreading. Other species were hearing the words of Admiral Kang. Some would dismiss it as the ranting of primitives. Others would feel fear for the first time in centuries, and the Dominion would learn what it meant to underestimate humanity on the planet below. Life continued as normal. Most people had no idea what had happened in orbit above their heads. They did not know how close they had come to extinction. They did not know about the sacrifices that had been made on their behalf, but someday they would know. Someday the history books would tell the story of the broken ship and the humans who fixed it. They would learn about Emily Park and Brian Lee and Admiral Kang. They would learn about James Yoon and Grace Hong and all the other brave souls who had fought and died. They would learn what it meant to be human, small, but never weak, primitive, but never stupid, underestimated, but never defeated. The vengeance hung in space above, Earth battered but unbroken. Its lights glowed in the darkness like a promise. We are humanity, it seemed to say. And we are just getting started.